The album opens on a simple piano as Rosenstock sings in tow, of losing your youth, of having to conform to the trappings of normalcy, of not wanting to move on from these hazy golden years, and of the pains of having to grow up. He sings about the existential dread of having to see your friends slowly melt away as they move on to another part of their lives, as they fall in love, lose out of touch, get married, have kids. As the instrumentals rise, with fuzzy guitars dominating the speakers in theatrical fashion, Rosenstock pleads desperately. This is Jeff Rosenstock's Worry, the soundtrack for an anxious generation. Hi, welcome to Modern Classics Revisited, where I look back at relatively contemporary albums which has been deemed classic. Although what exactly makes an album classic is quite hard to define. Perhaps it's the wider cultural perception of it, or the impact it has had to its scene. Perhaps it could be how it has emotionally resonated with those who listen to it, or because it dared to experiment with unusual sounds and styles. But really, it's whatever I deem to be classic, and I suppose there's no better place to start than with Worry. Chapter 1, Jeff Rosenstock, the last bastion of punk's DIY spirit. Jeff Rosenstock, born Jeffrey Ernest Rosenstock in Long Island, started his first band at the ripe age of 13. The Arrogant Sons of Bitches first started when he went to a swimming class with his brother where, in an attempt to look cool to an older kid, said he was going to start a band with a curse word, calling it the Arrogant Sons of Bitches. Apparently, the older kid did not care at all. Coincidentally, around the time, he and Joe Werfleman had just started a band. Coming together when the both didn't go to a friend's funeral because they were uncomfortable, they both chose to get together and play covers of Green Day songs. Naturally, they needed a name for this new band they've created out of thin air, so Arrogant Sons of Bitches it was. When the band came up in the 90s, ska punk was in the midst of a massive wave in the underground thanks to its third wave, especially in the East Coast. As Rosenstock recalls, bands like Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, Goldfinger, and Real Big Fish were getting major spotlights in MTV and music magazines. Despite starting in 1995, they came around to releasing an album in 98 with their debut, Built to Fail. What followed was several years of touring, album creating, and as Rosenstock revealed, a ton of credit card debt until they broke up. Aesop were small fish, and found it hard to stay afloat, which explains their large list of rotating members. However, they found relative success when they released their sophomore, Pornocracy, getting to tour with other bigger ska bands. An EP followed afterwards, but come 2004, their final album, 3 Cheers for Disappointment, came out. The lead up to the album was what truly broke the band. Destitute, drowning in credit card debt, sleeping and eating uncooked ramen in their tour van, and constantly playing unsold shows and making zero money from merch, its remaining members couldn't hold on any longer. By the way, he has said Aesop broke up on good terms. Considering several members joined Rosenstock in Bomb the Music Industry and some still touring with him today, it's hard to do so if you aren't at least mates. In the midst of Aesop's breakdown, Rosenstock had already started his new project on the side, recording an anti-George Bush song named Sweet Home Canada. This is the name. He released it under the name Bomb the Music Industry. Unlike Aesop, BTMI was markedly more successful. Thanks to the surprise success, Rosenstock decided to open up his own record label, quote-unquote records, with a very unique model. Actually, let's talk quote-unquote records real quick. When they started, they became the very first donation-based label on the internet. What that means is that folks could download all their tracks and albums for free, and if they choose, can donate however much money they want. Sound familiar? Well, it should, as Radiohead would go on to use this same pay-what-you-want model for the release of In Rainbows in 2007. According to the band, the scheme was thought up by their managers, Bryce Edge and Chris Huford. As Selway recounted, their management was debating for quite a while on how to release the record, but at the end of the day, this model was what stuck. Not only that, this release, as Greenwood said, was a way for the band to work around the rigid structure of the music industry, plus it would prevent leaks, which was very prevalent at the time. It was a rousing success for Radiohead, so much so many questioned at the time if it would become the future of how listeners and fans would buy music. Bandcamp would go on to form in 2008 using the same exact model. This time, artists can set a minimum amount but still allowing fans to give however much money they want above it. This meant fans could not only buy the album but also give extra bits of money to any musicians they love. If you wanted to, you could either set it to $0 or $100, it was your call. Of course, Bandcamp would not go on to become the future of music, unfortunately. But really, the very first people to pull off this model was Rosenstock and quote-unquote records. When you went to the page of an album, there would be a link which would allow you to download the album for free. Above it, a donation button alongside a suggested amount. By the time In Rainbows had released, BTMI had already released 4 records through quote-unquote, although not exactly like In Rainbows or Bandcamp, they were the first of its kind, and for all intents and purposes, the progenitor of the entire model. Okay, side note over. Bomb the music industry never made it to the mainstream, and frankly, I don't think they ever wanted to. With a band name like that, and with a frontman more interested in the art of music making rather than making money, I don't think they were ever destined to do so. As the name suggests, the band was rooted in punk's original DIY spirit. For the most part, all their shows were made to be as affordable as possible, usually around $10, and it was all ages. Not only that, the band for a very long time avoided making merch. As Rosenstock explains in a feature in Vice, the band only started selling merch because fans were upset as they couldn't support the band. So, instead of going the normal route, they encouraged fans to bring in blank t-shirts to which they spray painted on it using stencils. Not only that, if fans wanted to get a copy of their albums, they were asked to bring blank CDs and BTMI would burn a copy onto it. The band only accepted donations for the merch, meaning you could get it all for free. Eventually, BTMI started selling proper physical releases and merch, however their pay-what-you-want model still remained until they broke up. Actually, it remains till today, as Rosenstock still releases all his albums through quote-unquote. Naturally, since they stuck so strongly to their DIY ethics, they have been dubbed the Fugazi for the internet age of punk. Funnily enough, Rosenstock laughs at the comparison as he admits the band frequently turned up to gigs drunk and unprepared, did lots of drugs, and did all the non-straight edge shit you can think of. Despite that, BTMI was loved. Be it their ardent DIY beliefs, their infectious energy on stage, Rosenstock's deeply personal lyrics, sticking to the sounds of ska punk in a time when it was decidedly uncool, or how fucking genuine they always came across, they were special. After 7 records in the span of 6 years, the band announced an indefinite hiatus, a few months after the release of their final album, Vacation, in 2011. Later on in 2013, BTMI officially called it quits with a farewell tour to cap off the band's journey. They played their final show at Warsaw, a Polish music hall which was conveniently located just a block from Rosenstock's apartment at Brooklyn. Forever immortalized in Sarah Crow's documentary on the band, their final show was legendary. I'm going to read out an excerpt from Dan Ozzi's description of the performance which he wrote for Vice, as I think he summed up the entire night the best. The final shows sold out in just hours, with attendees traveling from all over to catch one last glimpse of the spectacle that is Bomb the Music Industry's live show, and Bomb didn't disappoint. On Friday and Sunday nights, the band played almost every song they ever wrote until they were drenched in sweat, while maintaining their trademark laid-back whatever dude attitude. As they took the stage the first night, they spent almost 20 minutes of the setup time just fucking around. They half-started Weakerthon songs, made inside jokes about God knows what, recommended Bill Cosby reggae videos on YouTube to the audience, and even asked to borrow a floor tom. Their last shows ever, and they weren't even prepared enough to have a fucking floor tom. Finally, after a good 15 minutes of dicking around, Rosenstock looked out at the 1,000+ people chomping at the bit to go apeshit and said, "Alright, let's just do this. Hi, we're Bomb the Music Industry." He played the opening chords and immediately dove headfirst into the crowd. Every single person in the venue, and what momentarily seemed like the entire punk scene, was completely absorbed into the pure, unadulterated energy of Bomb the Music Industry. Even the traditionally stoic older Polish women who operate the venue briefly took a break from picking up their empty beer cups, and there were a lot of them, to marvel. The gruff bartenders who looked like excommunicated members of the Polish Mafia came out to stand against the wall and scratch their heads as to what the hell was going on. Several hours of sweaty hugs, emphatic finger points, and desperate, teary final chants of "whoa whoa whoa" later, the final show neared an end. As Rosenstock sang the lyric, "Hell, confetti gun shot brightly colored paper over the crowd. And just as randomly and haphazardly as it started, Bomb the Music Industry was over. I implore all of you to go read Ozzy's incredible feature on the last night of Bomb the Music Industry. It's an incredible piece of music journalism. Before BTMI's final performance, Rosenstock had already made his solo debut, although this wasn't the first time he had recorded an entire album worth of music alone. The first 3 BTMI records were all created entirely by Rosenstock, so he had quite a bit of experience. I Look Like Shit was his solo debut under his own name. Although released as a mixtape, it released 2 months after BTMI announced the breakup. Although it took a further 3 years for him to follow up his debut, he obviously wasn't idle the entire time. He embarked on a summer project, which were songs he exclusively released to buyers of the Summer 7 Club. They were eventually compiled and released, and he obviously embarked on BTMI's farewell tour. However, in between all that, he was creating We Cool. When the sophomore came out, it was a massive success. So much so that this was the very first time Rosenstock had charted on the billboards. Number 7 on the Heat Seekers chart, 43 on the Rock chart, and 157 on the current albums chart. The single, which released a month before the album's release on March 2015, Nausea, tells you everything you need to know about the album. A song in which Rosenstock sings in gory detail of avoiding conversations with loved ones as he wakes up from a hungover stupor, all while writhing in the anxiety and depression he has found himself in. Painfully realistic and relatable lyrics, backed by a band playing some of the most raucous power pop, punk, and alt-rock you can imagine, the album took everything which made BTMI so great and condensed it to its highlights. However, it wouldn't take long for Rosenstock to top We Cool. On October 2016, Worry came out. Chapter 2, Worry, Anthems for an Anxious Generation. 2 singles preceded Worry, Festival Song and Wave Goodnight to Me. When both tracks initially released, they didn't exactly land with a massive splash, more like an exciting plop. Not that it was bad, in fact many praised it considering both songs were performed amazingly and its lyrics were biting and its commentary on the music industry and gentrification. However, it's always nice when we get to look at things with hindsight that it's quite clear that these tracks do not work independently from the record. They're both great songs, but what makes them fantastic is when it's part of the overarching record. That pretty much applies to every single song off of Worry. When I listen to We Beg to Explode, I need to hear Pash Rash for the song to completely click. And when I hear Pash Rash, I need to hear Festival Song for it to click, and vice versa. One of Worry's strengths is in its structure. No song on the track list is ever meant to work alone. I always tell people that you should never listen to a song outside of its context from an album, and I think it's especially true for anything out of Worry, and I think side B of the record illustrates this well. Running from track 7 to track 17, the song bleeds into one another seamlessly until the end of the record, similar to King Gizzard's Nonagon Affinity, ranging from the piano rock of Pietro 60 Years Old, the power pop of Blast Damage Days, the ska of Rainbow, the hardcore punk of Planet Luxury, and the anthemic alt-rock of While You're Alive. The 11 tracks show off just how versatile Rosenstock is. It's frankly quite impressive how good Rosenstock and producer Jack Shirley was at melding all these disparate sounds together into one cohesive flow which never interrupts one another. Even on side A, where the songs are not explicitly meant to seamlessly transition into one another, it still feels like you're listening to one prolonged segment. Perhaps is why Worry feels like such an enthralling listen from start to finish, as Rosenstock and the gang never feels like they let up in their impeccable track listing. They know when to build up the hype, when to sustain it, which songs to make an entire crowd chant along, when to calm it down for a moment, and once you've caught your breath, you're back at it again. I can't attest to this, but I'm willing to bet this is experience from Rosenstock's time from Bomb the Music Industry and Arrogant Sons of Bitches, as both bands were infamous for putting on incredible shows. And if you watch any live recordings of theirs, you can tell they know how to track list a set, and that's what Worry is like. Of course, a good track listing and structure can only take you so far, which is why Rosenstock is probably the greatest pop-punk musician to ever live, and I don't put this lightly. And frankly, anybody who has listened to his records will likely agree with me. Nobody does pop-punk quite like him. Blistering guitars, insanely catchy and sticky hooks, endlessly chantable moments, all wrapped up in an indelible blend of punk, ska, power pop, and indie. Even from the get-go in Arrogant Sons of Bitches, every single thing Rosenstock has touched has a unique twang to it. I suppose is why We Cool and eventually Worry landed so well with audiences. These sounds are obviously not new to Rosenstock, he has been perfecting it ever since he was 13 after all, but that's just it. Worry sounds exactly like that. It sounds like a master effortlessly going about his craft, and what we're witnessing is more than 2 decades of refinement. Power pop, punk, and ska has few things in common. And any record in the 2010s and beyond attempting to approach these sounds tend to feel like a glorified tribute band of Weezer, or Green Day, or Real Big Fish. But it feels like Rosenstock alone can not only bridge the gap between these sounds, but do it in a way which obviously comes from a place of love and reverence for the genres, which is why Bomb the Music Industry was so beloved. Sure, pop-punk was somewhat popular in the 2000s, but in the post-Strokes Julian Casablanca cool era of rock, it wasn't the popular thing to be doing, especially the sounds of ska punk and power pop, which just came across as old and stale. BTMI didn't care though, they did it anyways. They stuck to their guns, mixed the loudest and catchiest guitar riffs with these ska horn stabs to great effect. They were genuine. Worry is just an extension of Rosenstock's sound. He doesn't care that these sounds aren't popular, they most definitely weren't popular when it came out, because these sounds are a part of him and his music. And he does it with a lot of finesse. Be it pop-punk anthems like Wave Goodnight to Me and Perfect Sound Whatever, the power pop of Blast Damage Days, or the speedy punk of Bang on the Door. I like what Professor Sky had to say about Rosenstock's sound when he talked about Hell Mode, saying that he exemplifies the power of loud guitar music. Rosenstock pulls together all these sounds into one single record so effortlessly as he has done so over the past few decades, and Worry is a shining example of how good he is at doing that. Everything he does is just so damn sincere is a quote from a sentence from the liner notes of Rosenstock's Hell Mode. Although the writer was describing his tendency to make pop-punk sound so genuine, whereas so many others make it feel plastic, I think this same quote can apply to his lyrics as well. When I listen to Green Day sing American Idiot today, I don't feel like they genuinely believe in what they're singing. Same goes for Machine Gun Kelly, that whenever I hear him sing of his personal problems, I honestly have trouble believing in them. This is basically applicable to so many pop-punk adjacent acts right now. But Rosenstock is a whole different story. When I hear him sing of his struggles as being part of an unloving music industrial complex and festival song, I believe him. When I hear Planet Luxury's lyrics, I'd bet everything I own that Rosenstock wholeheartedly believes in everything he's saying. Rosenstock not only approaches his sounds, but also the topics of his songs with a lot of sincerity behind them. Although what I'd point out is that Rosenstock was never as overtly political as he was on Worry. Obviously, his music ever since Arrogant Sons of Bitches has had a political screed to them. However, it never permeated as much as on Worry. Let's take We Cool as an example. We Cool is a personal record, through and through. Pretty much every single song on it is about the highs and lows of being a human being and the existential crisis which comes with it. Worry is still that. However, plenty of political commentary is weaved into it, and it's quite a marvel of how good Rosenstock is at doing it. If the timelines haven't crossed your mind yet, Worry was created and released in the midst of Trump's campaign and eventual election to his first term as president. That fact can't be ignored, and it needed to be addressed in record. Rosenstock doesn't merely make political songs though, because if he did, it has the potential to come off as preachy. Luckily, he has this innate ability to connect it to the pains of being human. Frankly, the best protest art will always be those which can weave the intimacy of human drama with the doom that is our ever-cascading political climate, and Worry does it well. The Fuzz is an excellent screed against police brutality, but it also is a song about holding those you love close to you in times of crisis. Blast Damage Days is about the dystopic hypermedia post-capitalist stage of life we found ourselves in, but really, it's about holding on to love in this hellscape. Festival Song is a protest track about the music industry, but also outlines his personal struggle as being part of the system. For every remotely political message sung, he expertly connects it to an intimate aspect of our lives. Despite what brain-dead alt-right talking heads may say, politics is inherently intertwined in our daily lives, whether we like it or not. and Rosenstock understands this well, and he sings about it incredibly on this record. He sings of the existential struggle of being a good human being, of the anxiety and depression we found ourselves in, and the pains of keeping your head intact while living in our current political climate. Perhaps is why Worry is so relatable, because Rosenstock voices our fears so bluntly.
When you're a ghost,
Fuck yeah, it does. Rosenstock's lyrics are evergreen. I listened to Arrogant Sons of Bitch's last album when I was 15, a solid 10 years after its release, and I felt an emotional connection to it. Same goes for Bomb the Music Industry. When Rosenstock sings of wanting to run away with the love of his life in Future 86, teenage me felt that shit in his bones. I've listened to Worry more than a dozen times while writing this script. In fact, ever since its release, I might have reached the 100th mark. My vinyl copy of the record is well worn, with plenty of surface noise caked into it. In my archive of music, I still have the original MP3 download of the album I got from quote unquote's website in 2016. My heart still drops whenever I listen to the opener. My body is ready to mosh whenever I hear Planet Luxury, and my spirits are lifted when I hear Rosenstock sings about the falsities of perfection on the closer. Worry's themes are evergreen because it's made for an anxious generation, which is every single generation. No matter who you are, your creed, your background, your upbringing, your environment, you will always be a bundle of anxiety and nervousness we all can't help but be. In this hyper-capitalistic age, with mass media and information overload, each generation after the other is only getting antsier by the day. Worry is our anthem of anxiety and worry, but it's also this nice fluffy blanket which tells us that everything will be okay if you fight for what's right and hold on to your loved ones close to you. Love is worry is how Rosenstock ends off the penultimate track, and that single line is ultimately the album's and possibly his entire manifesto. Chapter 3. Rosenstock somehow tops Worry. When I listened to Worry for the first time, it felt like my entire life revolved around the album. As I grew out of my teenage phase to my university years, Worry was still in rotation and prevalent as ever. Now rapidly approaching my mid-20s, Worry still hits me as hard as it did when I was 15, and since its release it has rightly been heralded as a modern classic in pop punk. So how the fuck are you supposed to top your magnum opus? Well, he didn't do it instantly. Worry's 2018 follow-up, Post, was great, but I wouldn't go as far to say it was incredible. It was a great set of power pop and catchy punk anthems, which was hopeful for a near future, but it didn't capture the same energy as Worry did. 2020's No Dream was next up, and that made up for a somewhat underwhelming Post. It's only underwhelming considering what it had to follow up. No Dream was markedly more pessimistic about the future, and releasing in the midst of a pandemic, it was hard for it to not emotionally resonate. Most interestingly is that in 2021, a ska version of No Dream released, and I think this record is a perfect example of Rosenstock being the only person in the world who can make ska sound and look cool. However, really, it was 2023's Hell Mode which, to me, somehow tops Worry. Hell Mode as a title is deceptive, as what this album is about is healing. Heal Mode, as one of the tracks is aptly titled. Whereas all the records, including BTMI and Aesop's discography preceding Hell Mode, seem to writhe in its own misery, Hell Mode wants to escape the cyclical nature of anxiety and depression. Its opening lines illustrates this so goddamn well. What makes Hell Mode so amazing is everything which made Worry so incredible. The sticky hooks, the powerful guitars, the endlessly chantable lyrics, the political messages, and the feeling of wanting to hold your loved ones so tight you might crush them. But whereas Worry illustrated the pains of anxiety and nervousness in our modern age, Hell Mode illustrates the struggle of healing and becoming a better person in our hellhole. What's clear is that to Rosenstock, these feelings of depression and anxiety isn't merely aesthetics. It's fundamental to being a human, and perhaps to who he is. Chapter 4. Why we love Jeff Rosenstock. It's because everything he does is so damn sincere and genuine. Plain and simple. He's just like any of us. Depressed and anxious at the state of the world and at his relationships with the people in his life. He wants to be a better human being, but keeps coming across obstacles which feel insurmountable. I don't actually know if he's any of that, by the way. But what I do know is that he voices these very real grounded fears we all have in such a manner which is at once intimately human, but also loud and electric. He has frequently eschewed the traditionally masculine aesthetics of punk, instead showing that tenderness is the greatest act of defiance you can do. There's a reason why at BTMI's final show, It capped off with Future 86, an intimate song about running away with the love of your life. The crowd cried, moshed, and sung the final verse so loudly like their life depended on it. If you were to go to a Rosenstock show, there's a good chance that folks would be moshing to a song about letting go of your doubts, or a song about the struggles of intimately connecting with your loved ones. Punk has this tendency to be this overbearing barrage of anger and vitriol at the state of the world, and that's what makes it so great. But Rosenstock is the inverse of that. That's what makes him, and by extension, Worry, so incredible. He is able to sing of our humanly worries so adeptly, delivered with bursts of punk and power pop energy throughout. It's utterly infectious. Rosenstock is the last bastion of DIY punk. Really, if anything, the last bastion of punk's true spirit in general. But whereas so much of punk's history is wrapped up in this image of hypermasculinity and beating the shit out of each other, he refuses to take part in it. Rosenstock has shown there is nothing more punk than caring for those you love, and that's why we love him and Worry so much. Thank you so much for watching the very first episode of Modern Classics Revisited. So if you enjoyed the video, do give it a like and subscribe to the channel, or don't, I can't force you. And if you want to keep up with whatever I'm doing, do follow me on Twitter and Instagram. So yeah, I'll see you all around.